Good morning. It's great to be with everybody this morning. As a lot of people would have known, we had a press conference yesterday talking about tourism and what is happening in tourism in St. Lucia. And unfortunately, like a lot of other things in St. Lucia, the news is not very good. We've seen that last year that tourism arrivals were up 2%. And that was in a year in which the Caribbean had its best year in many, many years. So in fact, the Caribbean as a region grew faster than any other region in the world. And so the average growth in the Caribbean was 7%, and St. Lucia only had a 2% growth. But as a lot of people know, I'm an economist, and I've been many, many years in tourism, and I've always lamented the fact that we focus too much on arrival numbers, and we don't focus enough on revenue and on expenditure. So a better way to measure the expenditure of tourism is by looking at bed nights. So that's the number of nights that actually people stay in your country. And what we've seen is that the bed nights from last year declined by 5%. And that would be a very strong indicator that the total revenue, tourism revenues, would be down for St. Lucia. And the significance of us bringing that point up is that the Prime Minister earlier in the year had indicated that he was expecting the economy to grow by 1.5%. And he specifically said that it would have been on the back of strong tourism revenues. So now we know, because it's after the fact, that those strong tourism revenues never transpired. And as a result of it, can we now say that there's 1.5% growth? Also, let's go out and ask the people. If we went to the taxi drivers and said, do you think the economy has grown? Do you think that tourism has had a great year? Ask the farmers. Ask all the people who are part-time workers. When we look at the LUCLEC numbers, we can see that consumption of electricity has come down. So all these indicators tell us that, in fact, what the Prime Minister was saying was wrong. And as a result of those numbers being wrong, clearly what we've suspected is that the economy, again, for the fourth year, has not grown. We also highlighted the fact that the cruise industry has put out its schedule, and the schedule suggests that cruise arrivals are going to be down by over 20% next year. And when we saw the tourism arrival numbers for the month of January, which only came out in March, which is a bit late, we saw that the numbers are down. The total number of arrivals are down by 2.8%. That room nights, that special number I've said that would help us in understanding the revenue, room nights are down 15%. The US is down 7%, Canada was down 21%, the Caribbean was down 22%, and the UK was down 1.5%. In addition to that, cruise arrivals are going to be down 20%. So our prediction is that 2016 is going to be one of the worst years in tourism for many years. We're expecting that arrivals, stayover arrivals, are going to decline. We're also seeing that there's a decline in cruise ships. So that the Labour government will have left the tourism industry in a worse predicament than they found it. The other sad part is that when people play politics with policy, when I was Minister of Tourism and I came into office, immediately on getting into office, Caribbean Airlines, which was providing competition to Liat, had amalgamated with Liat, and we saw there was an immediate reduction in capacity in the Caribbean. And we had normally gotten about 75,000 to 80,000 Caribbean arrivals a year. That number dropped to below 50,000. Air Jamaica, which was an airline that I had worked with, was bought over by Caribbean Airlines. And Caribbean Airlines decided again to eliminate the hub that was created. And therefore, the 2 flights a week that we had, 2 flights a day that we had from Air Jamaica were also suspended. And we were left in a lurch. I didn't complain. I immediately went up and met with American Airlines and was able to get American Airlines to add on new capacity. We met with JetBlue, who had not commenced services into St. Lucia and had only gone to a select few destinations. And we were able to get JetBlue to start service into St. Lucia. We were able to get Delta Airlines, which used to be at 4 flights a week, to go up to as many as 9 flights a week. And I was also able to get WestJet, which was a new startup company out of Canada, to bring in additional services. And they went from, WestJet added 2 new services, which caused Air Canada to go from 2 flights to 5 flights. The other one that we did is we immediately, on getting into office, went to meet with British Airways that only had a half a flight to St. Lucia. So they used to fly London to Antigua, Antigua to St. Lucia back to Antigua, and back to London again. And within 6 months, we were able to get British Airways to put on 3 non-stop flights to St. Lucia. And then within a year of that, they had gone to a daily service. So the flights now went from London to St. Lucia, and then went from St. Lucia to Trinidad, and Trinidad back into St. Lucia again. And that did 2 things. One, it helped beef up some of the regional air services because, as it indicated, Liat had contracted considerably. It offered an opportunity for our farmers and our manufacturers to sell products to Trinidad. And it now gave us a daily service from London into St. Lucia. Then the SLP party, which were in opposition, criticized me and the policies of our party considerably, indicating that we should not be paying for airlift, and that was the wrong policy. But luckily for St. Lucians, that when the Labour Party did get into office, they did continue that practice, and the government did pay Continental Air started the service out of Chicago, which they paid for. And it is that increase in capacity that drove the increases that we did see in the U.S. market. So you can't have your cake and not eat it at the same time. In fact, if you're going to make one statement, then you must be able to follow it up. The other situations that we're now seeing in our country is the continuation of the Jafali affair, the continuation of the impacts. And most of you may have heard the Prime Minister last week responding to statements that Rick Wayne has been making for the last 2 weeks. So in January, the Prime Minister made a pronouncement that the government had engaged a lobbying firm in the U.S. to assist them with impacts. We're now finding out 3 months later, after Rick Wayne has challenged them, that the Prime Minister, in fact, engaged those lobbyists at the recommendation of a company called Arton Capital. And Arton is a company that was hired or selected to be able to manage our CIP program in the Middle East. We've now found out that Arton actually paid $150,000 US on behalf of the government to be able to have those lobbyists work for us. We're also finding out that the terms of reference for the lobbying firm was not to do with impacts, but to advocate for the US government to recommence supporting our police force. The interesting thing here is that the timing of all of this. Arton, who was given the contract to run the CIP program, when you look at the regulations that was passed by this government and that we complained about, is that the board, the CIP board, shall appoint a marketing agency with the approval of the minister. And the minister of the CIP program is the Prime Minister. And it's the same Prime Minister who also negotiated with Arton to pay for the lawyers in the US, which seemed completely unrelated. And I had written a letter to civil society complaining that the timing and the optics of the appointment of Jafali did not look good, and I believed the government ought to have dropped his immunity. I also indicated that Ernest Hilaire, who was involved in the appointment and who has not in any way been able to explain to us his role in the appointment of Jafali, was then made chairman of the CIP program, and we asked that he resign from the CIP program. The other thing that happened is that the Jafali people the government had passed legislation which the board members were appointed by cabinet and could be appointed and fired by the cabinet. And as I indicated to you, all the key approvals were not being made by the board, but finally being made by politicians. And we felt that that was wrong. We felt that there should be independence between the CIP program and politicians. Unfortunately, the government has not listened. And what do we now know? Jafali lost the high court case in court. In fact, the judge went out of his way to indicate that he did not believe that Mr. Jafali had ever taken up his post as a diplomat. We now know that Jafali's ex-wife has filed a case here in St. Lucia against the government for a judicial review. And a judicial review basically is questioning the rationale of the government in their appointment of Dr. Jafali as an ambassador. And this has created incredible negative press against St. Lucia globally, and has raised tremendous suspicions about our CIP program, our Citizenship by Investment program, because clearly it's suggesting that our government has been selling diplomacy. And I must also applaud Rick Wayne again for highlighting the fact that during the St. Lucia National Day Independence celebrations, that 4 people arrived in a jet who were all born abroad, having St. Lucia diplomatic passports, and whether in fact that they were asking whether in fact that they were citizens also of St. Lucia. So there seems to be a lot of things taking place that the St. Lucian public doesn't know about. So again, now we're asking one more time that Dr. Jafali's immunity should be dropped immediately. We should not be waiting for the results of the appeal case. And in fact, even if the Jafali is successful in the appeals case, we believe that pressure is going to continue to mount against St. Lucia to make this change. We believe that we cannot handle this negative press, and that the government ought to drop the immunity of Dr. Jafali. Since our previous announcement, Ernest Hilaire has now announced that he's going to be a candidate for Castries South, yet he has not done the right thing and resigned as chairman of the CIP. And I think he continues to bring a bad reputation to us. Red flags continue to be raised about his involvement and the political involvement in our CIP program. And the last one is we now know that we were right. The fact is the legislation must be changed to manage the regulations to manage the CIP program. There must be a separation between the politicians and the people who are running the CIP program. It must be independent. And so for not doing it is when all of a sudden Art and Capital is making payments on the behest of the government on unrelated matters. It raises tremendous questions as to whether there was quid pro in play. Again, now I have brought the issue of the dialysis machines. The minister has indicated that there is no equipment in the new hospital for the dialysis machines. And I want to reiterate that in May of 2013, the dialysis ward was tested and commissioned. The equipment that is missing is actually the chairs and the dialysis machines themselves that deal with the filtering of the blood. But all of the electrical, all of the piping, the water plant and the treatment plant, in order to facilitate those machines, everything's functional. The sad part is the European government has agreed to buy those chairs, and it would only take about 3 months to 4 months to order the chairs and for them to be here and for them to be plugged in. And that means that if the government truly wanted to, that as of January of 2014, the ward at the new hospital could have been functional. And I brought to everybody's attention because sometimes we forget the detail and the inhumanity that this policy is causing. We have over 100 people that are waiting for somebody to die to be able to get on the dialysis machines. Many of those people die themselves waiting to be able to get on those machines. And when somebody does die, the doctors and nurses then have to select one person to be able to go on to replace the person who's died. And in many instances, they have to take the person they believe has the best chance of surviving. So some of the elderly people who've been waiting are not chosen. Some of the younger people who may be in a weaker position are not chosen. In fact, what you're doing is you're causing doctors and nurses to play God. And I know it's a role that they don't enjoy at all. So I can't truly believe that this government cares. Because to come and suggest to the people of St. Lucia that Jafali was going to put a diabetes center and somehow that's going to help the lives of St. Lucians is really an outright lie and is disgraceful and is dishonest. If in fact you really truly cared, there's two things that you could have done and still can do. One is to open up those 11 extra machines. And secondly is to do something that you do so well, which is propaganda. We need a propaganda campaign to teach St. Lucians that diabetes is a lifestyle disease. It's what you eat and it's about your exercise. Those are the things that are going to be able to dramatically reduce the number of cases that we have with diabetes in St. Lucia. I've been getting some questions, so I want to say that I want to thank all the viewers for joining me today. This is the first time that we're using this technology to be able to communicate to everyone, and it's something we're hoping to be able to continue, because I know there's a lot of issues out there that some people need, that you need to respond to. So I've opened up. I want to be able to take any questions. So if you put in your questions, we'll be receiving them here. I have a team of people working with me, and we will try to respond to them as quickly as possible. You know, yesterday I had a great experience. I went down to the opening of the science fair, and I met some fabulous kids and got to see some incredible science projects. First of all, I wanted to say hello to all the young ladies from Ave Maria who sang 2 songs for me. I tell you, it was amazing. And it was also amazing to hear their insight in terms of what's going on in St. Lucia. And I just want to thank them so much. And I told them that I will live up to my promise. And I will bring Tedison John so that they can sing Ali Ali with him as well. And I also want to big up the kids from Etangs, the kids from Ravinclair, and I am looking to go back today to meet the kids from Miku who are participating in the science fair. And I think this is a fabulous program, simply because creativity and creative thinking is really what's going to save the day. It's that talent that's laden in our brains, that creative talent that we need to be able to develop as a government, because the world has become substantially smaller because of the technology. And St. Lucians no longer need to leave St. Lucia to be successful. If you have a great idea, you can make it global, right here from St. Lucia. But what we have to do is to help our young kids develop the confidence and improve their own creative thinking so they can compete. So our party has said that we want to have a globally competitive education. It's no longer sufficient to have an education that just teaches you how to read and write. We have to make sure that our young people, our future, can compete on a global basis, and that's something that we're very, 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 very strong priority in making happen. The other thing that we've been discussing is that sports is not a cost for us. You know, it's not about just taking a sweat and enjoying a recreational activity. We want to be able to use sports as an investment, and there's so many great examples. I mean, you take Laverne Spencer, who has gotten her education paid for, has been able to become an ambassador for St. Lucia, and clearly has an opportunity to go professional after the Olympics. And we're recognizing that that is a huge opportunity, but what we need to do is to create the environment here in St. Lucia to allow more kids to do that. And what we've recognized, that given the competitiveness of sports in the world, we must start coaching kids from a primary school level. We can't wait to see that talent when they're 14 and 15 and then trying to develop it. We're also recognizing that as great as it is to have volunteer coaches, it's not going to be sufficient. Nobody can dedicate sufficient amount of time in learning a discipline to the extent to help kids become more competitive. So what we're proposing is that we will have paid coaches in select disciplines in primary school and in secondary school, that we're going to really boost up our national sporting programs for a junior national team and a senior national team, and that those kids that are on those teams need to get scholarships, and they need to be supported, and that it's not biased to the regions. So I mean, when I was playing basketball and I was captain of the St. Lucia national team, 99% of the guys playing on the team came from the Castries Basin, simply because the kids from the outer regions couldn't afford and didn't have the time to be able to come and practice with us. And so if we want to see a more balanced growth, we have to do that. So we've written to the National Youth Council, and we've asked for the opportunity to meet with the youth and sports councils throughout the length and breadth of St. Lucia to discuss some of these issues in terms of how we're going to transform the youth of our country, what role government is going to play, and then also what the results are, because I'm a big believer that if you're going to do something, you can only be successful at it if you're measuring. And I think that one of the things that we want to measure it by is that less than 1/3 of our young students actually get to go to tertiary level, to university. And we want to see that within 10 years that we can increase that number to about 50%. And we think that St. Lucians can succeed in sports. When I look at how great we are at football and the number of scholarships available in the States to play football, the fact is that football also has a multitude of professional leagues around the world. And the great thing about football, it is also gender balanced, meaning that women's football is growing globally just as fast as men's football. Basketball, track and field, these are some disciplines that we believe are going to create the opportunity to get university degrees, but also at the same time to be able to become professional. And it's an area in which we see kids' talent. So, you know, I was giving the example at the press conference yesterday with Usain Bolt. Usain Bolt loved cricket, and left to him, he would have stayed in cricket. And it was the persistence of a track and field coach that saw that talent at a very young age and was able to convince both Usain and his parents to get Usain to dedicate some time. And we've seen how successful track athletes have been from Canada, from Jamaica. But there is a concerted effort. And when you look at the school games, you know, coaches from around the world come to those games, those high school games, to be able to start recruiting talent. And we feel as a government that we need to invest money in making sure that we have a lot of tournaments taking place here at the primary school level and at the secondary school level. I also want to say big up to the athletic program that's being operated out of PI. I had an opportunity to meeting with them and the coach a couple of weeks ago, and I was so impressed with the dedication of the coach, but also of the kids participating. And they had some young ladies who were coming all the way from Soufrière, so we had to hitchhike from Soufrière in an afternoon to be able to go and practice, and that the session had to end early enough in order that there was enough daylight for those kids to hitchhike back to Soufrière. And that's an incredible commitment, but I think that too many people are spending too much time just getting the program off the ground. And I think that that's a role that government needs to participate in, and a greater focus. And I've also always believed that sports can be a huge contributor, not only to getting education, but in teaching incredible values. In terms of View Fort and the plans we have for View Fort, we've put together an incredible team for View Fort. We're hoping very soon to announce our candidate in Choiseul. Jean-Pierre, Francisco Jean-Pierre has been announced already for Labrie, Doc Mondesi for View Fort South, myself for Micoud South, and Dr. Gail Rickebert for Micoud North. And we've specifically focused on getting a very strong team because we think it's time that the promise of the new frontier for View Fort become reality. And I have a very clear plan along with my colleagues in terms of how to make that happen. what we've seen is that people from Micoud and people from Laborie and people from Choiseul are now having to migrate up north to be able to get a job. And that has been destroying families. So the breadwinner, whether it's the father or whether it's the mother, have to leave their families in the care of either other family members or friends to be able to go and get a job, to put bread on the table. We want to know that we can create jobs in the South so that people don't have to do that anymore. And the question is, how are you going to do that? Because nobody seems to have been able to resolve that problem. Well, first of all, the United Workers' Party was very committed and remains extremely committed in developing the airport. And we see that the airport is a huge economic activity in itself, so many more people can be employed in that area. We've also spoken about being able to bring a cruise ship terminal down to Vieux Fort. And that's not to take away from what we have in Castries, but to complement already what we have in Castries. We think that the Genesis boats, which are the largest boats the cruise companies make, they physically can't go into Castries right now. And that we would build a Genesis berth in Vieux Fort. And we've also spoken to the cruise industry that they would allow us to use the berth also for cargo. So we would be building a facility that would be able to facilitate both activities. Presently, Barbados is the main home port area. So home port area is where the boat starts its itinerary, and the flights come in to bring those people that are going to go on the ship. We think the huge advantage that Heonora has, obviously, is that the airport is right there, and it's going to be less cost to transport and much easier for people to get on the ship to start their. Vieux Fort is actually closer to Soufrière and closer to Dennery than Castries is, and there's less congestion. So all of a sudden, people who are now going to go to Soufrière to spend the day, on their way there now, we can see the development of attractions in Laborie and Choiseul. Whereas right now, the cruise ship passengers don't even get to see these incredible locations. And the same thing applies when they're going to go to the zip line in Dennery, that they can pass through the two Micouds. And I can tell you, those constituencies are rich with cultural and historical areas that can be developed as attractions. The other thing is that we want to see the growth of hotels. So we would like to see Coconut Bay expand to 500 rooms. We have been in discussions with 2 other hoteliers about putting major hotels in the South. But the one that I'm most attracted to is a concept that I call village tourism. And I can't say that I am the originator of village tourism. Village tourism has been in existence for a very long time. And I had an opportunity to see village tourism working at its best. When I left here as director of tourism in 1994, I went to work for an incredible guy called Chris Blackwell. And Chris was the founder of Island Records. And Island Records was the label that discovered U2 and also Bob Marley and Melissa Etheridge and many more phenomenal artists. And Chris had sold Island Records to Polygram and then had turned around and bought 15 buildings in a place called South Beach. And I can tell you, in 1994, nobody knew about South Beach. South Beach was known as God's waiting room. So a lot of people from New York used to send their parents to retire and to die in South Beach. And he revived the whole Art Deco theme. But what was interesting about South Beach, and for those of you who've been there, is that the beach remains entirely public. And then there's a road, and then on the other side of the road is where the hotels and the restaurants are. So it means anybody who's staying at the hotels and restaurants has equal access to the beach, but more importantly, locals know that it's their beach. They don't feel compromised in any way. So in Vieux Fort, the Sable Point is where we want to be able to make that kind of development happen. So what we're proposing to do is to cut a new road along the fence of the airport into Vieux Fort town and create a space of 44 acres, and that the concrete road would now become a pedestrian road. And we would subdivide that area into smaller lots, making it substantially easier for St. Lucians to be able to get into the tourism business, whether it's through a restaurant, whether it's a small guest house, or whether it's a shop. And then you would have also accommodation in that area. So none of the hotels would actually be on the beach. The beach would remain completely public, so that the same thing would happen. So this is the kind of developments that we're looking not only to do in the Vieux Fort area, but throughout the length and breadth of St. Lucia. So we do need some larger hotels because we need critical mass to be able to drive the airlift into St. Lucia to make St. Lucia competitive. But at the same time, it's that culture that we have that makes a big, big difference.